What if one of America's darkest identity secrets was built on a misunderstanding? Imagine spending your entire life believing you came from an ancient nation, a people connected to mountains, rivers, fire ceremonies, and survival. You hear the stories at family reunions. Your grandmother says your blood carries Cherokee roots. There are old photographs in dusty boxes. Dark eyes, long hair, faces that seem to belong to another time. And for years, nobody questions it. Then one day, a DNA test arrives in the envelope. You tear open the envelope expecting confirmation, proof, validation, maybe even a connection to something bigger than yourself. Instead, the screen flashes something impossible. 0% Native American ancestry. Nothing. No Cherokee markers. No indigenous trace. No connection. At first, you think the test is broken. But then thousands of Americans begin reporting the same thing. Families who spent generations believing they were Cherokee suddenly discovered ancestry linked to places they never expected. West Africa, Scotland, Ireland, Spain, the Middle East. Entire family histories collapsed overnight. And that's when a disturbing question begins to spread across America. What if the story people believed about Cherokee ancestry was never the full story at all? Because this mystery goes much deeper than failed DNA tests. It reaches into government records, forgotten treaties, racial passing, buried identities, and one of the darkest secrets in American history. In the 2020 United States Census, hundreds of thousands of Americans identified themselves as Cherokee. Some had documents, others only had oral stories passed through generations. But when commercial DNA testing exploded across the country, many of those identities suddenly came under scrutiny. People expected science to confirm memory. Instead, science complicated it. Companies promised they could map your ancestry using a small vial of saliva. They claimed your blood carried the truth of your past. But indigenous identity isn't that simple. Autosomal DNA fades with every generation. Mitochondrial DNA follows only the maternal line. Y-DNA follows only the paternal line. One missing branch in the family tree and an entire ancestor can disappear from the results forever. A Cherokee ancestor from 6 generations ago might leave no detectable genetic signal at all. And there's another problem nobody talks about. Most Native American tribes, including Cherokee communities, have historically refused to provide large-scale DNA samples to commercial ancestry corporations. After centuries of forced removal, broken treaties, boarding schools, land theft, and scientific exploitation, many tribes simply do not trust private genetic databases. So the system built to prove indigenous ancestry was missing the very information it needed. That means when a DNA test says 0% Native American, it doesn't necessarily mean your ancestors were never indigenous. It may simply mean the database cannot recognize them. But then researchers uncovered something even stranger. When scientists began analyzing DNA connected to Cherokee descendants in parts of the southeastern United States, they found markers they didn't expect. European-linked haplogroups, Mediterranean-linked ancestry, Middle Eastern genetic patterns. Some samples carried lineages associated with ancient populations from places like North Africa, Anatolia, and the Levant. The results shocked researchers because these weren't isolated cases. patterns began appearing repeatedly in family lines connected to Cherokee communities, and suddenly the question changed. It was no longer, why can't DNA prove Cherokee ancestry? Now it became, what exactly is Cherokee DNA supposed to look like? For centuries, mainstream history taught a simple narrative. Indigenous peoples crossed into North America through Beringia thousands of years ago. Over time, they spread throughout the continent, forming diverse nations and cultures. But the new genetic findings complicated that picture. Some researchers argued these unusual markers came from colonial-era intermarriage after European contact. Others believed the explanation might go deeper. Ancient migration theories resurfaced. Stories of transoceanic contact returned online and through fringe historical circles. Most historians rejected these claims outright, but the mystery refused to disappear, especially after one particular discovery in North Carolina. Archaeologists excavating near ancient Cherokee territory uncovered human remains buried according to local ceremonial customs. Everything about the burials suggested indigenous identity, but the DNA didn't match expected Native American markers, not even close. The woman's genetic profile pointed somewhere else entirely. And suddenly, researchers faced an impossible question. If the burial was Cherokee, but the DNA wasn't, then what defines belonging? Blood, culture, memory, law, community, or something far more complicated? Because hidden beneath this genetic mystery is a darker American reality. For centuries, race in America was manipulated, rewritten, and weaponized. Families changed identities to survive. Some claimed Native ancestry to escape anti-black racism during Jim Crow. Others invented Cherokee connections to hide painful family histories. Some communities blended cultures so deeply that official records no longer reflected reality. Over generations, stories evolved into truths people genuinely believed, and the Cherokee became central to that mythology, not because Americans fully understood Cherokee history, but because the idea of Cherokee ancestry became emotionally powerful. It symbolized survival, freedom, mystery, connection to the land, a forgotten American past, and eventually millions wanted access to that identity. But the deeper scientists looked into the DNA debate, the uncomfortable the truth became.
Because the real secret was never just about genetics. It was about who America allowed to belong and who it erased. Long before DNA kits existed, before ancestry websites, before algorithms tried to measure identity through percentages, the Cherokee already knew what it meant to disappear. The destruction did not begin in a laboratory, it began with removal. In the 1830s, the United States government forced thousands of Cherokee people from their homelands across the southeastern United States. Entire communities were uprooted from Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and North Carolina. Families were marched west under military supervision through freezing temperatures, starvation, disease, and exhaustion. Thousands died along the way. Today, history remembers it as the Trail of Tears, but even that name barely captures the horror. Children froze beside roadsides, parents buried relatives in unmarked graves before continuing west. Entire bloodlines vanished during the journey. And while the Cherokee struggled to survive, America began rewriting their image. Newspapers portrayed them as tragic figures of the past. Painters romanticized them. Politicians treated them as obstacles removed for progress. Slowly, the Cherokee transformed in the American imagination, not into living nations, but into symbols. And that symbolic version of Cherokee identity became strangely desirable, especially in the South. As racial laws hardened during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many families faced brutal social realities. Under segregation, being classified as black could strip people of land ownership, voting rights, education, safety, and opportunity. So some families altered their stories. A black ancestor became a Cherokee. A mixed-race grandmother became an Indian princess. Dark skin became native blood. Over time, these stories passed from generation to generation until they no longer felt invented, they felt real. And in many cases, families genuinely believed them. The myth spread everywhere. You have Cherokee blood. That's why your hair looks like that. That's why your grandmother had high cheekbones. That's where the dark eyes come from. But the Cherokee had no princesses, no royal bloodlines, no crowns. That part was invented by American culture itself. And still, the story survived because it protected people. For some, claiming native ancestry created distance from anti-black racism. For others, it softened uncomfortable truths about slavery, violence, or mixed ancestry hidden in the family tree. Sometimes the lie became safer than the truth, and eventually nobody remembered where the story started. Then DNA testing arrived. Suddenly, millions of Americans believed science would settle old family legends forever. But instead of clarity, the tests exposed buried histories nobody expected. One family discovered their Cherokee grandmother was actually descended from enslaved West Africans. Another uncovered Sephardic Jewish ancestry connected to families expelled during the Spanish Inquisition. Others found links to Irish, Berber, Turkish, or North African populations. For some people, the results were devastating, not because they disliked the ancestry they found, but because it shattered the identity they inherited. Imagine hearing one story your entire life, then learning your family may have created it out of fear. And that's what makes this mystery so painful. Because many of these stories were never simply about deception, they were about survival. America's racial system forced people into categories where identity could determine whether you lived safely or suffered publicly. So families adapted. They blurred lines, changed labels, protected secrets, and over generations, those survival stories hardened into heritage. But while ordinary Americans were struggling to understand identity, another battle was happening inside Cherokee citizenship itself, and it had nothing to do with DNA, because legally, Cherokee identity is not determined by genetics, it's determined by paperwork, specifically a set of records called the Dawes Rolls. Between 1898 and 1906, the U.S. government created official enrollment lists for members of the so-called 5 civilized tribes, including the Cherokee Nation. The government claimed the rolls would organize land ownership and tribal citizenship, but many Cherokee people saw them differently, as tools of control. Officials forced tribal members to register individually, breaking apart communal systems and preparing indigenous lands for division and privatization. Some people refused to enroll, others were misclassified, names were misspelled, entire families disappeared from records. But over time, those flawed rolls became something powerful. Modern legal Cherokee citizenship often depends on tracing ancestry back to someone listed there. Not DNA, not appearance, not oral tradition, documentation. That means someone with strong cultural ties and indigenous ancestry may still be denied legal recognition if their ancestor never appeared on the rolls. At the same time, descendants of people incorrectly listed generations ago may legally qualify today. The result is heartbreaking.
Thousands of people believe deeply in their Cherokee roots but cannot prove them through federal records. Others carry enrollment status but possess little cultural connection. So who decides identity? The government? The tribe? The blood? The community? The deeper America searched for answers in genetics, the more obvious it became that Cherokee identity was never something science alone could define. And then another conflict exploded, one that revealed just how dangerous identity politics could become when law, race, and history collided. After the Civil War ended in 1865, America entered another era of chaos. The nation was rebuilding itself through laws, treaties, and political compromises. But deep inside Cherokee territory, another painful question was emerging. Who counted as Cherokee? During the 1800s, the Cherokee Nation had enslaved African people, just like many southern states. And when slavery ended, thousands of formerly enslaved black families remained within Cherokee communities. Some spoke the language, some carried Cherokee surnames, some had intermarried for generations, many had nowhere else to go. In 1866, the Cherokee Nation signed a treaty with the United States government, granting citizenship rights to these formerly enslaved black families and their descendants. They became known as the Cherokee Freedmen. Legally, they were recognized as citizens, but history rarely leaves identity untouched. As decades passed, tensions grew over land, resources, and tribal sovereignty. Questions about ancestry became increasingly political, and eventually, blood itself became a battleground. When the Dawes Rolls were created, officials separated people into categories: Cherokee by blood, freedmen, intermarried whites. These labels carried enormous consequences.